I'm getting on a soapbox today, 100%. We're talking about plotting, not plotting, although sometimes it feels like we're plotting when we talk about plot and trying to figure out plot. But that's what we're doing, plotting. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking, subscribing. I really do appreciate it. Let's jump in. Okay, so you have a kernel of a story. You've got, the someone wants something badly, they're having trouble getting it, they get it or they don't. You know what that is, right? You know generally what happens, but you don't have all the pieces yet, and you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I plot this thing? How do I think about it conceptually in a way to make a good story? So let me use an example to help you with this. Let's say I want to go from Los Angeles to St. Louis. So I live in Los Angeles, born in St. Louis. So I want to get from Los Angeles to St. Louis. Now, there's a lot of ways I can go. I can go the southern route and go down I-10 and then go up. I can go a little more north and go like I-40 and go through Albuquerque and then Oklahoma City and on up. Maybe I want to go through Colorado. So maybe I go up a little more north and I drive through I-70 and go down that way. Maybe though I don't want to drive. Maybe I want to ride a train. So I could ride the train. Maybe I want to fly. But what if I'm afraid of flying? I could also, one other thing I could do is I could get on a boat. I go all the way down through the Panama Canal, over to New Orleans, get on a river barge and go all the way up to St. Louis. There's lots of ways I can get from LA to St. Louis. Now, the plot is essentially what connects the beginning to the end. What is the path that I take? That's the plot. So whether I drive, fly, ride a train, take a boat, doesn't matter, some combination thereof, that is essentially the plot I'm getting from the beginning to the end. A plot simply connects all the pieces. But let's say, for the purpose of our example, that I am afraid of water. I'm really not. I love scuba diving, but that's a whole other story. So for our story, I'm afraid of water. So I'm not really wanting to take the boat the whole way, but something I need to learn is I need to kind of overcome some of my fears. Maybe I'm a very timid person, and so I want to start trying to overcome my fears. So I'm not going to go on the water the whole way, but what I am going to do is I'm going to get to New Orleans, and then I'm going to ride a boat from New Orleans up to St. Louis. And this is going to help me with my fear. So this is my journey. Now, how might I get to New Orleans? And what are the stops I'm going to make along the way, right? Maybe I stop in Albuquerque. Maybe I stop then in Dallas, and then I stop in Shreveport and then go south to New Orleans. Maybe that's what I do. Maybe that's my path. So let's say I do that. I go to Albuquerque, then Dallas and Shreveport, and then to New Orleans, and then on a boat up to St. Louis. This is my plot, essentially, right? Now, the thing is, I am identifying what are the key landmarks, what are the key moments along my story. And when you are plotting your own story, you have to identify what are the landmarks along the way. What are the places that our character is kind of going to have a significant moment? They're going to have a significant moment in Albuquerque. They're going to have a significant moment in Dallas, another one in Shreveport, and then another one in New Orleans, and then maybe something on the river along the way, and then they're going to get to St. Louis. What are the landmarks of your story? And you can add as many or as few of those depending on what happens at each of those landmarks. When I start thinking about those elements of my story, those are related to the story itself, okay? The way I go and the landmarks along the way, that is related to story. But I also, when I'm plotting, I have to take one other thing into consideration. I also have to take the character into consideration. Why is Albuquerque important? Why is Dallas important? What about Shreveport? What about New Orleans? What about the place on the river? What about St. Louis? Why are those places important? What's going to happen to my character in those moments? Where are they changing? So one of the things when you are imagining and creating a story, you are imagining what the life dream, what the want, what the need is for the character. Well, each of those places may be related to the want and need or life dream of the character. Maybe they're reminiscing. Maybe their family's from Albuquerque, so they're going to stop there. Maybe they have relatives in Dallas, so they're going to stop there. Maybe they have friends in Shreveport, so they're going to stop there. Like, maybe that's why they're doing it. Maybe they're going to, meet up with and make up with an old enemy in one of those places because they're trying to be less timid, right? And if I'm thinking, okay, I want somebody to be less timid, so what are some things that I can do along the way to help them be a little more courageous, to step out, to be a little more self-confident? What are some things I can do? So it's not just I need the landmarks. I need to know why those landmarks. If I'm driving from here to Dallas, for example, and I'm going through Albuquerque, there's lots of places that I can stop. So why Albuquerque? Why is that the moment for my story that I'm focusing on? Well, that has to be a character reason. It can't just be a landmark. So I've got to have the landmark for my plot, my story part, but I also have to have the landmark and the why for my plot for the character part. And those are the two things that are working together or against each other along my journey. And as long as I have those two things happening, I'm paying attention to the story part and the character part for everything along my journey, and I focus on the landmarks and I focus on the why, I'm going to be able to start figuring out what the plot is of my story. And it doesn't matter if you're writing a story that's got a journey kind of a thing or a quest kind of a thing, if it's a relationship thing, it doesn't matter. There are landmarks that you have. There's the moments that you have. When you sit down and imagine your story, what are the scenes? What are the moments that you're like, oh, I see that scene. Oh, I know that's going to happen. Oh, I know that person's going to have a fight with them and I want to watch that happen. Like, those are your landmarks. Those are your moments. And so you want to key on those. Now, one other thing to realize and to think about is you want your character to move as far as possible from beginning to end. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean location like in my example. So, I mean, yeah, St. Louis is kind of far from Los Angeles, but it's not that far, but it's far, right? So I'm still moving. There's some change there, but there's also going to be a change in character. I want my character to become less timid as it goes along, much more courageous as the journey progresses. However I want the setting at the end to be, I want it to be as much opposite as it is at the beginning. And the more I can do that, the longer I can take my character, the more satisfying the ride. Now, I may have a character and I'm trying to get them to be a little more courageous as they go, and they're going to do this one thing when they get to St. Louis and they're looking forward to doing that, or they're planning to do that, but they get there and they chicken out. I can have that as a story. They don't have to always succeed. You don't have to have a character that always wins. Like, sometimes it's fine that they lose, but I understand why they're making the choices they're making because I've been tracking with them the whole way. Now, this is where we need to talk about the elephant in the room. And you may not be aware there's an elephant. There's a huge elephant in the room. And this is where I'm going to get on my soapbox. So one of the things that tends to happen, you're a newer writer and you're like, I need to figure out a plot. How do I plot a movie? And you go and look and you find a different story map. And there's a bunch of them out there. So some that you may be familiar with might be something like Snyder's Save the Cat, or Campbell's Hero's Journey, or Booker's 7 Basic Plots, or Pulte's 36 Dramatic Moments, or like, there's a bunch of them out there. And then there's iterations of them, and they take moments of a screenplay and what things should happen, and they start calling them weird things, like this is the moment where the character climbs the mountain, and this is the character where they, dig through a tunnel, and this is the character where, or this is the moment where they're out in the desert and they're lonely and all this, and they create fancy things and all this stuff. And all you got to do if you want to have a plot is just take your character through these 15, 16, 13, 27, however many there are things, and you're going to have a great story. And that's a bunch of hooey. Okay? No. Those things are there to help you start to figure out and ask questions. But do you have to follow them? No. Now, are they helpful? Yes, they can be very helpful. Sometimes they actually help you figure out how to get around a problem. But does that mean you should just adhere to it? And when somebody says, hey, you need to have this thing that happens on page 15, and if it's not happening in your script on page 15, you're like, oh no, I'm a failure as a screenwriter. No, that's not true. That's not true. And where it starts to be a problem is when people start equating the storytelling element, so how we tell a story, with the story itself. Okay? We're talking about the story itself. How do you plot a story? These maps and things like that can be very helpful for mapping a story. They are not helpful at all for the storytelling part, the way you let your audience experience. Now, you need to know as a story writer what those landmarks are. But you may choose to tell your story out of order, or you may choose to move things around in different ways. So we follow this character's perspective and point of view, and then we follow this character's perspective and point of view. Well, all these plot things don't change. We figured those out. We're still going through Albuquerque. We're still going through Dallas and Shreveport and New Orleans, where there's going to be something that happens on the river. We're still going to get to St. Louis. I don't know what's going to happen there, but if you figured out your story, you know what's going to happen there. In our example, I haven't thought that far ahead. So I've got all these things, right? I can track with what the story map is saying, and it helps me plot it. But that doesn't help me tell the story. And this is the problem. Some people say all those things are bad because if you follow them, it makes your stories very predictable. If you try to write a script and turn the script in and it follows this formula exactly, it's bad. And that's true because it's storytelling. But if you're thinking about it from a story perspective, here's the story. I need to figure out these beats. This should happen, and this happens, and this happens. Sometimes those story maps can be really helpful. Why? Because they help track a character's emotional progress through their journey. So if you find one of those maps helpful, feel free to use it. It's perfectly fine to use it. But if you think that you're supposed to write a movie that you follows all those things and you track those things and all those things happen on the set pages and all that, yeah, you're in serious trouble. People are going to read your script and be like, I know exactly what's going to happen. It's too predictable. It's too boring. It's basically saves the cat. And it's like, yeah, I know. I read one of those the earlier. No, just don't do it. Okay. So let it be a tool to help you tell the story, right? To figure out what the story is, I should say. And then you take all those moments and now you figure out the best way to tell the story. So here's all the plot. Here's what's going to happen. What's the best way to tell it? Maybe you tell it backwards. Maybe you tell it jumping around time. Maybe you tell it parallel stories. Maybe you've got two people going to the same destination. Who's going to get there first? Maybe it's a race. I don't know, right? But it helps you figure out what the story is. That's what those maps are for. They are not there to write the script for you. So please, if you're trying to write something and trying to hit the midpoint on page 60, you're in trouble. Don't do it. Okay? But do you still need a midpoint in your story? More than likely, yes. Why? Because that's what helps make stories work. So you want your story to work, and then you want to tell a good story. Okay? So hopefully you understand the difference between the two. Plotting is really hard to do, but it's also at the same time very simple if you break it down and have landmarks and you understand here's what happens and here's why that landmark for that character is really important. And if you can do that, you can figure out your story. I'm 100% confident. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. If it has, please like, subscribe, bell, all that. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for doing that. I hope that when you're writing a story that you are enjoying it. And if you're going to tell a story that matters. See you later.